Have you ever seen one of those pictures where somebody took a dog's face and put it onto like an old painting? That's exactly what we're going to do today in the Lightroom Whisperer. My friend's got a new puppy coming and her breeder sent her a picture, so I'm going to make her a gift by taking that picture and melding it together with a Renaissance portrait. We're going to use both Photoshop and Lightroom Classic today, and we got a lot to do, so let's get right to it. Before we get started though, did you know that in real life you and I could actually work together to improve your photography? Whether that be remotely from the comfort of your own living room, joining me around the world at any of the amazing destinations that I lead small group workshops, or even creating your own one-on-one like we're doing here. Light Source Journeys, helping illuminate your photographic journey. For more information, check out the description below. Now let's get to it. My friend has a new puppy coming and I wanted to make her a little gift. So I'm going to take a picture that the breeder sent her, and I'm also going to take a Renaissance painting that I found online, and I'm going to combine these two. This breed is a Hungarian Vizsla. The painting I found is of a king from the early 1500s from Hungary, because I wanted to kind of keep that lineage together. So we're going to take Leo here and make him King Leo. I want to take that painting and I want to now merge the two together, but I need to make everything look similar for the dog and for the painting. So if I go into my develop module, I can use something called a reference photo in Lightroom Classic. And that's going to allow me to click this little RA on the toolbar. If you don't see this down here, just hit the letter T. That's your shortcut to bring up and down your toolbar. And now I can drag from my film strip the picture that I want as a reference. If you're trying to match white balance or the color of a shot or skin tones, this is an easy way to be able to have that reference sitting directly next to the edit that you're doing. Now in this case, we can see that this painting is very high contrast relative to this shot. The shot's low resolution, washed out. It was just like a quick phone shot that they sent to her. But I want to be able to try to make these highlights and shadows and all of that contrast come through on this dog, so everything looks like it was painted into this shot. The lower resolution isn't really going to make as big of a deal overall. As long as these two images are close to the same resolution when we put them together, that'll give us the ability to have at least the sizing similar. The slight fuzziness from this lower resolution will actually maybe make it look closer to the painting that we have rather than photographic sharp. There's other ways that we could take care of that and kind of augment it to make it look more painted, but if we don't have to go to those far steps, I'd prefer not to. So I'm going to start right out by trying to increase. We can see all the highlights on here are really bright. So let's see what happens if I just start bringing up the whites. We can already see those ridges on like the eyebrows and the top of the head standing out much more, and bring up those highlights to really accentuate those. But to contrast that, we're going to bring down those darker shades like the shadows and the blacks a little bit. And let's just bring up the exposure and see what that does. Already we're starting to get a little bit more of that high contrast coming out. And that's the next thing I might do, is go and increase contrast to see what happens here. Now, already just from my starting point, we already have a lot more depth in this shot. There's a lot more dynamics to it. And now I'm starting to get a lot more of these little ridges to stand out against there. So I'm going to go back to my reference photo and take a look here. And you can see it's definitely got a lot more of that characteristic coming through. We're going to use the clarity to ramp that up even more. And I want to look at his face. I want to see this as my main subject, so I'm going to brighten it up until that's the point. And we can already see a lot more interest and depth in that shot there. If we take a look at the color though, there's a bit more yellow and even some greens in this shot. The shadows especially have a heavy green cast to them. First thing I might try to do to replicate that is right here, bringing the greens down and the yellows up a little bit in my white balance, just to see if I can get a little closer to the feel. It's already feeling a little closer. If I look at the hair, for instance, which is kind of that similar kind of tone to the hair on our little buddy Leo, we can see that it's getting a kind of close look, but the shadows don't really have much depth or green to them yet. There's a couple ways I can try to affect that. I can try to go in with my color grading, and I can try to just affect the shadow regions and pull in more green tones. Now this is a little bit more heavy-handed, being a global adjustment. It's going to do this to everything that's a shadow within this range. We can blend and try to affect how much that's really coming into the shot, if it's on the heavier or darker side, or the lighter, brighter side. So by coming with the blending down here, we can kind of confine that more to the shadows. It looks all right, but the effect doesn't really seem to carry through with me entirely, so I'm going to actually come back and just double click on that. It resets it to 0, and we're going to go and instead of using color grading, we're going to go to a local adjustment. We're going to go to our range, and we're going to use the luminance range. This is going to allow us to take the dark tones and affect that. So if I'm going to take my eyedropper, I'm going to put it right in the dark shadow here, and now I'm going to take this and shape that filter. This is going to allow me to say, no, I just want the darkest tones to come through by limiting it on the left side. And then this is our blending, our feathering. How much of that dark transition is being captured in this filter. And I want to pull that down so it's only the darkest ranges being captured here. Now we've really got some of the shadows on him that are going to start to carry through with that greenish tone, and I'm going to start to just affect that with, I can try here with this slider, but it's not doing a lot. I'm going to go right to hue and see how that does. See, if I pull back and forth, we can see the green coming into the shadow, or more magenta. I'm going to come over until that green is filling the shadow and bring up that saturation a bit. Now if I just look at a before and after on this mask by itself, it's subtle, but all of those little shadows now have that greenish cast to it, and if we look on the painting, that similar kind of feel is carrying through. That's what we're trying to do, is get that replication. You might even see, by expanding this a bit more, if that looks good or not. It probably looks about right. See that shadow bleeding out, being a little bit more feathered here, and that same kind of replication is coming into the edge here. Let's see how that looks all together here. Now tone-wise, I think that's looking pretty good. Let's just bring down his exposure a little bit. It might be a little bright. Let's see how that works. We can always come back in and tweak this if we need to. A little bit of vibrance on there. And might try to get a little more yellows into them. Okay, so I think we have a fairly good match here, so I'm going to bring it into Photoshop now, and we're going to combine these two and see what we can do. The resolution of these shots, if I hit Info, are pretty darn close. We can make them closer if we need to by adjusting the image size when we're in Photoshop, but this is pretty important. If we take one that's twice the resolution, when we try to overlay those in layers, without adjusting that image size beforehand, it's going to be giant compared to the small one. We can shrink that later on with our transform, but it's best to try to be as close as possible to that intended resolution if you can. So let's get back to our grid view. We're going to take both of these shots. We're going to launch this into Photoshop, and this is going to be with our Lightroom adjustments. Otherwise it's going to take those original files without everything we just did to it and give me that more muted shot of the dog that isn't going to match our painting. Now that we're in Photoshop, I have Leo sitting here and I've got our king over here, and if those pictures were not the resolution that they needed to be, a similar resolution, I could go to my image drop down menu, I could come to image size, and then I can match these, or at least get them pretty darn close to each other's resolution. Now in this case, they were pretty darn close to begin with, so I don't really have to worry about that so much. What I do have to worry about is Leo is facing one way and our king for our portrait is facing another way. So I'm going to go ahead and I kind of want Leo facing this way in the final shot. I'm going to flip our king around. The same image drop-down menu, if you come about halfway down, has image rotation, and here we're going to flip our canvas horizontal. Now he's facing the same direction as Leo. Leo, though, we need to cut out of this shot. There's a couple ways we can do that. The easiest for me these days, thanks to all of the new stuff built into Photoshop, is going to be just coming to this little bar and hitting Select Subject. That's going to try to isolate Leo and just pull him out specifically amongst that background. We could have also said Remove Background, but that's just going to give us a blank background with Leo sitting there still, not allowing us to have those what they call marching ants dotting around him. This did a really good job of defining him. We don't have to go in and adjust that at all. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit copy like I would in any other program. On a Mac, Command-C, on a PC, Control-C. And then that's going to take our selected sample of Leo, and I can paste it, Command-V or Control-V, right on this painting here. Now we're only going to really need his head, his neck, his ears, so I can start to erase a lot of this here. But we're going to do that through masking rather than anything else. The masking is pretty easy to do. We have layer 1, which is Leo's layer, selected, and down below here we have what looks like a monochrome Japanese flag. When you click that, it creates a mask on this layer. You see how the mask is entirely white. Masks are used with white or black to allow that background to come through or to get rid of it. So you see over here I have white and black chosen for my colors. If those were not there, you can change your color swaths by clicking on one and then choosing that color. And then I'm just going to use the paintbrush tool like you would use in anything else in Photoshop to then paint that specific color on here. So if I come through now, let's make a bigger brush. If I paint my black, you see he's disappearing against that background. If I go, oh wait, no, I want some of that to come back, I can switch this, and I can paint white. And if we look over on the side, you can see the black is where he's been erased. The white is what's showing through on there. This is a little bit easier than using like an erase tool and pulling away because we have a lot more control in what we're doing with that background. So I'm going to switch these again. I'm going to start removing some stuff, and we're going to go back in and fine tune this later, but we need to get it down at least to the basics. His neck and his head are what are going to be coming out of here. Now we've got a pretty decent removal there going on, but we need to change the shape of this. So to resize Leo to match our king, we're going to go ahead and shrink or change our opacity. By doing that, we can see through that one layer more, and now we can position it so it lines up. We're going to now take the little pointer tool up here and move Leo down, and we can see though he's still considerably larger than we need. So I'm going to grab the corner and shrink, bring him back, shrink him down a little bit. I'm trying to get his head to look kind of natural within there. Now I'm taking some cues from our king here. If we look at Leo's ear, that kind of falls in the back like this guy's hair. If I have that right about there, that's pretty good. If I've got his neck coming down into the collar, that's pretty good too. So I might try to find a way I can position Leo's head to look natural, coming out of the collar, covering most of this king's head. Trying to not block the little medallion that we've got up here on the hat, and also trying to keep this proportionate. Now if I need to tilt this a little bit, once I come outside of this resizing box, I can see my arrow changes, my cursor changes to that curved arrow, push and hold, and we can change and rotate exactly where we need to be from there. Let's see here. Maybe a little more. Trying to make sure that it's kind of covering that hair where his ear is. I'm trying to make sure that this neck looks natural coming out of here, and I'm also watching where he's falling on the hat up here. If you're trying to move around and you feel like snapping back and forth, you can't position it exactly where you want, then using the arrows to nudge it around is going to allow you to fine-tune exactly where your positioning is. Let's see how that looks. Let's bring up our opacity. That's looking pretty good size-wise, I think. We might have to change that a little bit in the long run. We can always go back and reshape our sizing on here, but I think I like the way that's starting to look. Let's bring his head down just a little bit, though. I'll go back to my moving tool. Just nudge him down a bit. Still watching that collar. I want that to look natural. Go about there. Now we still have our layers sitting here with our mask. So if I click on my mask, it reactivates that. I can grab my little paintbrush again and I can start erasing. Now I have a little bit of feathering set on here, and that's going to allow it to kind of blend coming into the collar on here. If I turn off the feathering, it'll look way more abrupt. If I need that sharp defined painting within the lines, I can come up here and just say hardness. That's our feathering. That's where it's set to, or not. Up here it's like you've got a very defined line and you're able to paint directly down it. This is the feathering up all the way if our hardness is down. So I'm going to just see how well that gives me blending up to here. And let's bring down that hardness. Let's see. Right up against the collar. The angle of his head's looking a little weird to me, so I'm going to go back in. I'm going to say, let's get our little pointer tool back and bring the angle down a bit and see what we can do. It's already feeling a bit more natural to me. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to go back to our brush. Continue to erase so it looks natural coming down into the neck. Don't worry about the little bit of hair coming from our king. We can go and use the remove tool in a little bit and fill that in. We want to make sure though that his neck coming out of this collar has a very natural feel to it. I'm going to go with a little smaller brush now, a little harder edge, and just start to clean up below his ear a little bit to make it feel like a neck. There we go. I'm going to ramp up my feathering and make sure that it doesn't have a very hard edge to it, because nothing else on this painting is hard. It's all very soft. There we go. That's feeling a little more natural already. Now, of course, this hat is going to play into here too. He's going to have a brim. He's going to have some shadow coming down, and we wouldn't be able to see all of his head underneath here. So we're going to also go and erase some of that masking and that layering over his head. Let's get some of this down here. Just like his ears tucking out from inside of that. Same thing maybe on this side. Now I like the way his head is positioned in there. I like the way it's kind of pulling through, and you can kind of see it almost looks like that hat in the background. It's a little sharp against here. I might come in here and with our brush, I'm going to come now with a 0 hardness on here and just kind of smooth that edge. Same thing kind of around the edge up here. And now that looks pretty natural, so we're going to go back to Lightroom Classic to do the rest of this. Previously, we would have had to really spend a lot more time in here finishing this, giving the shading and everything, but the masking has come so far in Lightroom that we're able to do that there now, and I think in a little bit cleaner way actually too. So let's go ahead, we're going to save this, but we're going to save this as a PSD or a Photoshop file. That's going to keep these layers as separate layers, so if we ever want to come back and work on them, we can independently go and say, let's erase a little more of Leo's face from here, the neck doesn't look right, or if we need to change coloring. So we're going to save this now as, let's call this King Leo. And we're going to make this a PSD file. And I'm just going to save this to my desktop because that's where I had my original one saved. But normally I would save this into my Photoshop files folder. In my normal bank of where I keep my images, I do have a folder that says Photoshop files. So anything like this, I will generally save there so I know where it's stuck. Okay, go ahead and say yes, and now we've got our King Leo PSD sitting there. So I'm going to close Photoshop. We have no more need to be in here. Don't save because we don't want that to change our shot originally. All right, we've got Leo in here, so the first thing I want to do is go and I want to open up our masking, and that's going to allow us with a brush to create that shadow that we want underneath that hat. So by going to a very high feathering, we want a lot of diffusion there, and we're going to a low flow. That's going to allow us to really kind of build that in. And I'm going to bring down that exposure, some of the shadows, and a little of the blacks. And right under here, we want it to look like that hat is casting a shadow. Now remember, our shadows also had a heck of a greenish hint to them too for the rest of the shot, and we want that to stay consistent. So let's go to our color, and we're going to bring our temperature down a little bit. We're going to bring some of the greens in there, and now you can see that shadow's taking on some of the greens like we've got in the original painting too. And I might actually go in with a little bit more exposure, and we can watch that darken up. I'm also trying to keep with the lighting of this, so we've got light coming down on his front, but we have more shadow on the back, so we can see that the back of his neck is very bright, and that kind of tricks the illusion, so we're going to want to darken that also and create shadow there. I'm going to do a separate mask for that, though, because that's going to be a little more heavy-handed than the one we've got up here, but that's now starting to look pretty good. Let's create a second brush mask, and we're going to go in and just define that area there. I think it's a high enough contrast that our auto mask should be able to see this pretty well. And then we're going to do the same and just darken this so it's kind of similar to the front of his neck. Let's make it a little bigger brush, a little bit less feathering so we stay within our lines, and let's see what we can do here. When photographing anything, we're just photographing how light falls. And same thing with a painter's painting. They're watching and seeing how that light's falling. And we want to keep that consistent through there, and that's going to help trick the viewer even more. Okay, yeah, the auto mask did a really good job of helping define this. Keep it within its lane. I might bring it down a little further. Shadow a little bit. And then similarly, I want some of that greenish tone in there to be able to keep consistent with the rest of our shot. Too much. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Give it a little more saturation on the green, and then just a little more hit here to make that darkness carry through. Okay, our before and after on that is stark. I don't really want it in his ear as much, so I might come in and subtract using a brush. Still going to keep the flow down a bit on this one and the feather up a little, but let's get rid of most of that. There we go. And I think I like the way this is coming together here. A little bit more darkness under here. That's looking pretty good. Now we still have the hair from our original king here, and I want to go and I want to remove that. So I'm going to close up my mask. We're going to go to the clone stamp tool. First I'm going to go in and feather these edges. That way it's more blended coming through there. It doesn't have that sharp definition. I'm going to go in and create this area here that we're removing. And I'm just going to grab this and pull it to an area and find one that looks pretty good, that matches pretty well, and gets us fully into there. Let's see. Let's see if we can get a little bit more relief just by moving this over, and that's where that dark line was coming from, not on our buddy here. That looks pretty darn good. I couldn't tell that there was hair there or that I've done that tool. I like it. I think that looks pretty good overall. The shadowing underneath the head looks really nice. The way that the back of the neck falls in, both color and tone look good. I think we've done a good job at making him kind of resemble the color and tone that we've got from the painting overall. And that softer look to the original picture, if anything, I think helps complement that painted look. I think the only thing left to do is export and send it off to my friend as a little gift. Thanks for joining me today on the Lightroom Whisperer. As usual, keep on Lightrooming. Photoshop takeover.